Thanks for joining us on Political Talk on another PolitiPod Live. Tonight we'll cover Out to Sea, Oh Shoots, Please Think of the Children, international news, odds and ends, and if time permits, an election central update and an Epstein count-up update. I'm Hannah Soldner.
And I'm Matt Nisanoff. We start tonight with Out to Sea. Mm, I'm sure you've heard by now the stories of the USS Abraham Lincoln. It's been out at sea for over 250 days, and it's probably there's one other longer deployment, which was the USS Gerald Ford during the Vietnam War. Stayed out over 300 days, and still too long and too mishandled as far as leadership is concerned. They there's issues with supplies, dirty clothing, lack of food, mental health issues. In fact, some of the sailors have taken to jumping off the ship itself. One man was out in the water for over an hour before he was picked up. And so it's a very serious mismanagement issue that the Navy has. Of course, when asked about it, Trump's reply was there was asked, have they been out too long? And he said, not nearly long enough, showing his trademark empathy. The head of the U.S. Central Command, Admiral Brad Cooper, actually visited the Lincoln. I'm sure it was in very good shape when he got there. And he said that he did acknowledge that there were mental health crises. There was a mental health crisis on board. But then he added, there are fewer cases on the Lincoln than on other ships. So I don't know what information he has, but it might be interesting to find out where he got that information to make such a really stunning statement. The USS George Washington has been pulled from the Asian theater and been sent up to replace the Lincoln. Uh, Hannah, what do you think?
It's I'm struck as you're sort of as you said at the beginning, this is a story we're all pretty familiar with. It's been it's why we chose it as our top story this week. Um, but what's so interesting here is so much of the like rebuttal, or even when you said that there was one ship during the Vietnam War that was out longer or whatever. Not that that's a rebuttal, but just that like um the so much of the callousness out of the administration or the people in power, whomever it is, as if there's like it's worse for some people is like never an excuse. It's just like, oh wow, it's really bad, and they're like, well, some people had it worse. It's like, okay, that's not helpful. um yeah, somebody always has it worse. That doesn't mean that you know so long, 265 days at sea isn't atrocious. And like, yes, the mental health, yeah, it could, like you said, they probably zhuzhed it up for him. But even so, like, that doesn't mean, just because there are worse ones doesn't mean that it's not all, past whatever threshold is awful.
Exactly. And when the families of the sailors are contacting people to make it known what's going on, that is a very serious sign. I mean, with the military, military spouses are allowed to, speak their minds and to say what they're saying, but they are so ready to go out of their way to protect the sailors and the military that for military spouses to come out and actually say this is a really serious problem. They're eating, barely cooked meat and a taco or something for a meal, and that's not suitable for anybody. If you're hard at work and doing military, trying to reach military objectives, and so the fact that the military families felt they had to come out and say something publicly shows a how that it's crossed that threshold of being more than serious, and it's a real issue. And how they handle it, as management. Hegseth and Trump are basically the heads of the company, so to speak. At least that's how they see themselves. They don't look at themselves as heads of services. They look at themselves as heads of businesses. And so the fact that they would mismanage their business so severely that people would be harmed, of course, to them it's always other people, so it doesn't matter so much. But the fact that they're doing that should be a signal to other people as to where the situation that we're in.
It also makes the Hegseth's insistence on people taking, testosterone or whatever, like all the more galling. Like you want the best of your people out there, but you're not even gonna feed them. Maybe worry about that first.
Yeah, exactly. The basic mission stuff of clothing, food,
Right.
and minimal efforts to address mental health, having them be allowed to contact their loved ones, keeping up with making certain that they have access to contact and stuff. That's just so important to someone who's in the military. It's remarkable that it's even a question.
Yeah.
Um, okay, regretfully, we'll have to return to our next issue as well, and that is oh shoot. And this is where there have been enough incidents with guns in our country this week or in the past couple of days that here we are to talk about them. Charles Young Park in Lexington, Kentucky, for example, one dead and four wounded. Police still don't know exactly who was the perpetrator and have called on the public to bring in tips. So they're relying on the citizens to address or help with that one. Memphis police stopped a car and found a passenger had been shot dead hours earlier. So the person driving had shot his wife and then decided to drive across country and or down country. And when they were stopped several hours after the incident, her dead body was finally noticed by officials. Chesterfield, Virginia police arrested a 19-year-old, Cameron Harris, for shooting five people at Virginia State University. One was only one of them was a student out of the five people shot, and Cameron Harris, although he was hiding when they found him, he had been gotten into the dormitories and was hiding in someone's um, closet area. And that's where they found him. But so a shooting incident done in Virginia. And last Friday, five people, including the shooter, were killed in a gun spree in Michigan. One girl survived that and is in the hospital recovering. Anything on shootings before we go to the news story as well? The other story that's in the news on shooting?
No.
Yesterday, Minnesota's Attorney General, Keith Ellison, sued the Texas governor for extradition of an ICE officer, Christian Castro. Castro is the one who shot Julio Cesar Sosa Silas on January 14th. That was a shooting incident sandwiched in between the murders of Renee Good and Alex Preddy during the so called Metro Surge. At the time, ICE claimed, and still it's on their website, they claimed that this was an issue of self defense, that the um, that Mr. Sosa had tackled Mr. Castro, was on top of him, trying to beat him up and kill him. So Castro had to use his weapon to defend himself and shoot Mr. Sosa. The issue is there's a video, and as with all these incidents with ICE, it's simply not true. It is not what happened. And in fact, the person who the initial incident uh, attracted Castro's attention was not even Sosa. It was another person entirely. And he was chased into a house where in an apartment building where Sosa was outside shoveling snow. This was January in Minnesota. And the video shows that as soon as Sosa sees somebody running at him with a gun, he drops his shovel and runs inside. So there was no interaction with Castro. And in fact, uh, Castro catches up with the other person, jumps him, and struggles with him. But that guy disengages and runs inside as well. Both of them were inside the house. Castro recovered and decided to start shooting. So he was shooting into a house with people and children, and in fact hit Sosa in the leg, and the bullet went clear through his thigh and lodged into one of the walls of the children's room. So, of course, Christy Nome, who was the head of the department at the time, had tried to make this a cause celeb and tried to make it out this kept repeating the false story and narrative. And the fact is that not only was none of it true, but now Ellison is following up and wants to have the ICE agent extradited to Minnesota for prosecution. The catch is that he has the ICE agent, Mr. Castro, has been recently arrested by a Texas sheriff and is in jail in Texas. And it's the Texas governor who is preventing the extradition. He's involving himself in the issue to prevent Castro from being sent back to Minnesota. And so Castro's been in jail since May, and Ellison wants to try to get a hold of him before he's released. We'll have to see how that plays out. But the Texas governor is the obstruction here to having Mr. Castro face justice.
Well, and not even justice, but just like uh, a trial or even like a pre-trial or whatever.
Even right, exactly. Yep. Have him brought before, at least brought to a judge,
Right.
an indictment, and to see what should happen next.
Exactly.
Speaking of things that are next up on PolitiPod Live.
Won't somebody please think of the children?
Let's hope. Hannah, do you want to take this?
Yeah, I just got to say that speaking of things that are next is the best segue ever. um, this is not a funny story at all. Sorry. Okay, so first, Trump has been doing his signature domestic policy has been this reworking of SNAP benefits, and I'd seen this just people talking about it, but according to ProPublica, more than 770,000 children are no longer receiving SNAP benefits after the changes. So I mean, like, there's always been this push from the conservative side to be, to try and get work requirements or whatever. That's what these are. Basically, they're introducing you must be doing 80 hours a month of work or volunteer or equivalent. But the thing is there's very little leeway. And so, this 770,000 children, three-quarters of a million children are now no longer receiving SNAP benefits. And they obviously have there's nothing they can do, right? It's not, punishing their parents, punishing them through their parents is just it's not doing anything. It's just not giving children food. Um, and Yeah, and so that was the first thing I just wanted to talk about, like this, like who is helped by these, more than three-quarters of a million children not getting SNAP benefits. Um, did you want to comment on that?
Well, I'll say this: it's a very similar thing. This is a benefit that they have already been gone through a process, been approved for, is something that they are receiving because uh, it's helping them. It's providing them with something they need to be able to participate in society, and so finding a way to pull it, just like Medicaid and Medicare, you can find a way to justify taking it, but that doesn't mean that you're helping. That's in fact you're making things worse, and there'll be a price to pay for that later down the road. And so it's not being done as part of some sort of a justified action against something. It's just being done out of malice.
Yeah. And the whole point of these programs are, well, apart from just like that it's the morally correct things to do, but the sort of like, if you want to put numbers to it, research has shown that just like children who have eaten do better in development, cognitive development, school performance, all these kinds of metrics. And so, um, even in the worst case scenario, if we're being tricked out of taxpayer money or whatever, the argument is still that it's probably worth it. And also you know, there is no evidence that all of a sudden there's all this like massive malicious children stealing from the governmental coffers or whatever.
Right. Right. It's actually benefiting us to help.
Yeah. Um, Next thing to think about, when you're thinking about the children, is that there's a record number of kids have had vaccine exemptions this past year. Um, yeah, record share of kindergartners missed required vaccines, which is happening, as not only as Trump is trying to make it even less, less imposition, less, restrictions on exemptions, but also we're having these, like, as we spoke about last week, these sort of record outbreaks of, vaccine preventable diseases. Um, so it was already bad on paper, and then it was bad in real life, and it's getting worse.
Exactly. And only going to get worse with this nonsense about how they need to signing an executive order saying you have to get individual shots for each ailment now instead of a combined shot, because he just doesn't like the idea of it. Trump doesn't like the idea of there being a combination shot that you can just give one time. So he's trying to force it to be 5 or 6 separate shots, which is not going to go over well. It's not going to be convenient. It's not going to help parents get things done so they can be at work. It's not going to help the kids because they're going to have separate shots that they don't want to get, and that will, so since it's been proven for decades, like fluoride in the water. It's one of those things where it's not only been done, but it's been shown to be a benefit. And for some reason, trying to find a way to scare people is more important than to look at what is actually happening and look at results.
Yeah, well, it's been shown to be a benefit, and it's been shown that stopping it is a detriment. So you can't be like, oh, eradicated, whatever, so we just won't need to vaccinate against it anymore. But also, I want to zoom in on something you said. Trump doesn't even have some kind of, you can't even say that there's like flawed science or something like in some of these other studies. He just doesn't like how much people are getting vaccines. He's kind of, relying on the, it seems unnaturally high, and so therefore it must be wrong, but there's no any kind of science behind it, and he's not even claiming that there's science. He isn't even going as far to be like, you know, oh, I heard this thing or whatever. He's just saying like, no, it must be.
Right, right. Well, and RFK Jr. will be whispering in his ear another thing as well. So the conspiracies and all that kind of stuff. So he picks up on what somebody else is saying, and RFK must have been the last one to talk to him, because whoever speaks to him last makes the largest impression.
Speaking of conspiracies, Meta's trial yesterday started, charging that they have targeted children with addicting algorithms across their different social media that Meta owns: Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. Um, and so I actually didn't take the time to look and see if anything happened since then, but there's this massive um, trial that is going to start, and with potentially, some commentators have said up to, trillions of dollars of sought damages. Um, so, and obviously, like, huge ramifications, and for a company like, Meta, though, certainly isn't alone in this, right? How many times have they been brought not against, yeah, into high courts and whatever, to talk about all the terrible things they've done, and that time they facilitated genocide, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so,
Well,
uh,
and the state's attorneys generals have said at court, they said, we've got evidence, we've got a whistleblower, and we've got documents from the companies showing that they knew it was harmful to children to do some of the things they were having them do, but it kept them on the app longer. So they went ahead and did it anyway. And so this is like they made a case about how this was like when they went after the cigarette companies,
mhm.
where the cigarette companies were like, "Oh no, it's healthy. It's good for you to have tobacco. It dries out the lungs and it's really healthy." And all along, they know exactly what's actually happening, that it's bad for you, and that this is it's the same situation all over again. Here's the company saying, "No, it's fine," and actually, the attorney for the company said some absolutely nonsense in defense of it. I'm not recalling it off the top of my head, but it was one of those arguments like, "Hey, if we were hurting kids, don't you think we'd stop?" It's some sort of
No,
absolute lunatic sort of statement, and it was like, you're making that as a case in front of a judge.
right.
That's amazing, absolutely startling, and it was this. It I think it helped with getting the point across that they were just completely. Um, it was just a dodge, and the whole thing is just such a farce that their arguments are absolutely not going to stand up again with a judge. Nor
Yeah,
should
well,
they.
and one of the things that sort of enabled these tech companies to avoid certain things is that they'll just say, like, especially when it came to, like, facilitating a genocide through Facebook, where they're just like, we had no idea, and the difference here is they clearly knew. They can no longer be like, this is a new technology, who knew it could go, whatever. It's like, no, I mean, Facebook has been around for, like 18 years now or something longer. Um, and not only has it been around a long time, but Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram, they're all global. So you have nothing if not data from, like, every potential, you know, group you would need. That's literally their whole business, is to farm data. So they can't say, like, oh, we didn't know. It's like, no, you had to have known. That's literally your whole business model.
And also the in France, the it's interesting because it's a sort of a twist on this whole thing is happening over in France, where the legislature passed a law to ban people under 15 from using social media. So there was an actual ban passed and put in place, but the French High Court said that they would block the ban so that it was not legal to prevent the children from using the social media. So there's another twist to the whole story. We'll have to see how the meta case plays out, but that's another little factor to throw in.
Yeah.
Okay, and here's where we move on. Speaking of France, we can also look at some things happening in the rest of the world with international news. And we've got there's a whole bunch of things to talk about in this, and we'll try to cover as many as we can depending on the time we have. But we'll start this with what's happening in with Russia. There's a couple of stories that popped up in the past week, and that includes that Russia has launched another round of attacks into Ukraine. Their invasion continues. Ukraine responded by sending 800 drones targeting Russian military adjacent services, which is a new twist, and to go after energy sources and producers of products that the military is using. So there's a service similar to Amazon or to Timu, the Russian version of it, and they are selling products that are being converted into weapons by the military. So one of the things that was targeted, along with energy sources, was the headquarters of this business, and just shows that the Ukrainians are stepping up. The Putin won't let the invasion stop, so Ukraine is stepping things up, and now people in Russia itself may find they are starting to have hardships because of the disruption to their economy and their country. What else? The political parties in Russia. They have an election coming up, or what passes as an election there, and Russia has officially banned the last political party that objects to the invasion of Ukraine. So now there are 10 parties left, and all of them support the invasion into Ukraine. So the big issue, or a big issue, has been removed from consideration in the elections by the Russians, just making it easier for people to make decisions, I guess.
Yeah, you got
And
10 parties. You got to make it easier.
exactly. And so the next Duma will continue the Ukrainian invasion. A Russian tanker was grounded and spilled oil in the Gulf of Oman. It's that's the sort of the part of the world where this is all happening now. So perhaps perhaps it will just be fine. But a big oil spill in the Gulf of Oman. We'll see if that doesn't help make things better.
Yeah, I hear oil prices are great right now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I believe they're back. What aren't they up by $100 a barrel or up that way? Yeah, and actually, Trump even came out and said, "Hey, so what? You're paying $4 a gallon for gas. You can pay that $4. That's not much. It's it's he's the way, and he's the one who promised that if he were elected, it would be $2 a gallon for gas. But
To our
$4 is
international viewers, that's a high price here. I understand that gas is expensive lots of other places.
it certainly is. Um, Indonesia. Some news from Indonesia. There was an earthquake that had killed a large number of citizens in Indonesia recently. Britain had citizens killed by a heat wave that's happening in Europe right now. Japan has had citizens killed by unprecedented rainfall. And the US has citizens killed by the presidential order in the streets. So these are not alike. Speaking of, I mentioned Britain in that last story. Another side to the news: Britain has been reintroducing, for the first time in 400 years, beavers. Beavers are being reintegrated into the society in Britain, and they're helping with the flora and fauna. It has actually had ecological benefits because of their setting up and going back to work and doing what beavers do, building dams and grabbing and moving things around. And they seem to be doing quite well. They're reestablishing themselves quite famously. Thought I'd throw in a good one in there, something that
I noticed. I was like, hey, love this. Who doesn't love a beaver?
I'm a big
Wood,
fan.
I guess. Wood maybe doesn't love a beaver, but otherwise,
The natural enemy.
yes.
Uh, oh, speaking of enemies, Donald Trump has scaled back military exercises in South Korea. He says it's in order to appease Kim Jong Un. He just loves his friend, and he just wants to show that he loves what his friend is doing, and he just wants to do something to as a tip of the hat to show he cares. There are some who point out that South Korea recently said that they would not join in on the denuclearization of the Islamic Republic of Iran when Trump asked them to. And that happened a couple of days before he started to reduce the schedule of military exercises with South Korea. Could be one thing, could be another, could be a combination of the both. And speaking of that very war that's going on with Iran, Trump demands Iran surrender. And since Iran and Oman, an ally of the United States, have had some discussions and some talks, Trump has turned his ire onto Oman. And he says that if they get in the way of the Iran war, that Trump will bomb the shit out of them, meaning bombing Oman, our ally, and someone that we have used as an intermediary to talk with Iran and others. This is diplomacy at what conservative media calls the 5D chess level. But to be fair, he probably just got one of Hegseth's T shots, got him revved up on testosterone, allegedly.
Allegedly.
And Canada, you may have heard that there's been some reduction in the tariffs that Trump has put on Canada. It's been reduced, and there's been some positive steps of things going on there. But what's even more remarkable and has not been as highlighted is that Canada has announced $70 billion in clean energy projects, creating jobs and expanding clean electricity generation nationwide. So that is a positive thing that Canada is doing to move forward with clean energy as it has been developed and is becoming more and more useful and applicable. Anything else on the international front before we?
No, but I will notice as you ended that the beaver is the national animal of Canada.
Fair
So,
point.
and they are not only being good in Britain, but natural dam builders. So
That, yeah,
beavers.
exactly.
I just wanted to get an extra beaver,
That's our beaver reference.
yeah, touchstone in there.
Excellent. Fantastic. What a tale.
All right, nice, nice.
This brings us to our next segment. This is odds and ends. And we can kick this one off with the New York tax that Mayor Mamdani has worked with the governor to establish. It is a tax on second homes that are valued at over $5 million. So, in other words, if you live here in New York and you don't have a second home, or you have a second home but its value is under $5 million, then this tax is not applicable. This is not going to be a tax you have to worry about. But the whole thing was put on hold by the courts. Now they're saying it's okay. They put it on hold for a little bit. Now they're saying go ahead and you can roll out the tax as scheduled. Although the council looked at it, the city council recently held a hearing on it, and the mayor did not show up for the hearing. So the council are all very angry and upset that he didn't join in on their discussion of it. So we'll see how that affects things as it continues to roll out.
I saw today that a comedian had said earlier this year. Oh, let me give a little bit more background. So, you mentioned that it's second homes, but it's also, if you rent out those homes, then you don't get the taxes on them. Or if you donate them, they don't get taxes on them. And so a comedian made a fake website that connected artists with, or maybe it wasn't even a website, maybe she just said it, that connected artists who needed loft space to work or live in with people with second homes, so that the artists could live in there for free and they wouldn't have to pay the $5 million or the taxes of the over $5 million. And she said it as a joke, and now she's been contacted by both artists and by homeowners trying to connect them. And so, ironically, I might become a thing, actually.
Perfect.
Yeah,
She can actually make money on the setting up the renter thing, and then she can continue to do her comedy.
yeah, exactly. And it gets artists, free, really nice space.
Yeah, really excellent. It's an excellent idea.
Yeah.
Kudos. If we can, do you happen to, if you find out what her name is, or if you remember it, let me know, and maybe we can see if we can get her to get her as a get an interview.
Oh man, that would be amazing.
Maybe we can get her on here and have her chat for a minute about how it's working out. That'd be pretty cool. Uh, Next story in odds and ends. The White House press secretary, uh, Carolyn Levitt, has decided to quit to be with family, she says, which is a phrase in Washington, D.C., meaning she was fired. She did recently give birth, so there certainly is someone at home. There is family at home that she can take that time with. But, not every mother who has a child has that luxury.
Right.
Not every mother can take the time off or quit their job just to be with family or with a newborn. So it's convenient for her. That's nice.
And as stated before, some people who would like to do that are now getting their SNAP benefits cut. So it's actually getting harder for people.
Excellent point. Although I'm sure for the White House, it will not be hard to find someone as accomplished in mean spirited obfuscation. It would be painfully easy, as Fox has plenty of staff to choose from to replace Ms. Levitt. I don't think they've named anyone up to at this point. They said that her assistant was going to take over for the time being, but I don't know if that's going to be the official replacement. We'll have to stand by and see what happens. Can you tell us a little bit more about ICE proposing insurance against the legal repercussions for
Yeah.
police who make arrests?
So it's exactly that. So ICE is pitching insurance because they're deputizing local law enforcement to make these sort of immigration arrests, as PBS puts it. That's the source of this news. It's very, more gentle than we would have said, right? Raids. But now these, as more and more of these people are getting sued for misconduct, ICE is trying to create an insurance system so that they wouldn't lose their livelihood just because they uh, illegally tried to, arrest somebody or engaged in on-duty misconduct. Wouldn't want to get in the way of their, you know, raids. So yes, ICE is pitching an insurance to do that. They don't have it yet, but they're working on it.
No doubt.
And they're gonna, I think it's going to be subsidized. So your tax money subsidizing the insurance so that people can break the law.
And including up to murdering fellow citizens
Indeed.
in U.S. cities. There's a bit of news for you. ICE is also planning on buying, allegedly, they're going to buy special gloves that can provide electric shock. So they're going to apparently buy $20 million worth of these shock gloves so that they can, I'm sure, misuse them. I'm sure that they will say they need them very badly and that they need to use them very badly. And that would actually fit. Actually, they will use them badly.
Yes, they say they're very effective, and that's not my concern. My efficacy is not my concern. It's the horrific way it's going to get used.
Yeah. They will justify if they're even if they're a real thing, then they will find a way to misuse them like they misuse firearms, and will use them to harm people for no particular reason other than to show that they can do it and that they are in control. And so we'll have to keep an eye on that, see if that's actually a real thing or if this is a PR stunt or what's happening with that. And the only other thing I can think of is Trump once again is blaming secret vandals for damage to the grass around the location where he had a 4th of July celebration, right about where they put right about where the White House folks put tables and had activities going on. Something happened to the grass, and it must be vandals, right? I mean, just like the reflecting pool, there was a secret vandal who slashed with a some sort of a knife or something or a razor and slashed right down the middle all the way along, and that was the real reason for all of the troubles. And of course, that was untrue. And uh, so is this.
But why not
Is
try it again? Why not try that same excuse again?
exactly. You want to make certain that you're on top of things and using the same excuse that didn't work the last time, because it gets the word vandal into the conversation.
That is true. Then you can keep using it.
Yeah, and that's always important. Although it is interesting, he didn't blame it on Antifa thugs.
That's true.
So things are evolving. Alrighty. It looks like we do have time. Time does permit for us to have a check-in with Election Central. As you may well know, the primaries are continuing to roll along in both August, and there'll be a handful in September as well. So we're going to keep giving you updates on what's happened when time permits. And for this week, we had yesterday there were elections in. There was a follow up on something in Minnesota. There's stuff happening, and there were elections, primary elections in Florida and Wyoming. and Alaska, and one in California, which was a special election for a congressional seat. And first, I think the news of the goings on in Minnesota. You may have heard that recently in the primaries there were um, one of the candidates was for the governor's race on the Republican side, being primaries. Both of the parties, or all of the parties that are eligible, get a chance to elect people to be their nominees to run for their party in November in the general election. And in this case, one of those people was Mike Lindell, the hello guy, hello maker, and fraudster in the fake news of the stolen election. Well, he was running as a Republican candidate in Minnesota, and he lost. He lost to another Republican, won the governorship or the governor's the nomination to run for governor as a Republican. And you'll never guess what happened.
He fell asleep.
He fell asleep. He had a wonderful night's sleeping on a wonderful pillow. And when he woke up, it reminded him that because he lost, then the election must have been rigged and stolen and contain uh, fake voting something or other.
It's
So
true. The people have been demanding Mike Lindell more in their lives. How could he
exactly,
not have won?
it's shocking. It's
Yeah,
shocking. And so he's going to look into the stolen governor's governor's nomination race, mostly because he lost. We'll see how far that gets him. He can maybe send attorneys to court like Trump did after 2020, and maybe he'll lose the same 40 cases that Trump lost nationwide in trying to promote that whole thing. And speaking of the 2020 fake electors, you may recall there were a handful of states that where Trump lost. Those states put together a group of people, called them electors from their country, from their state, and tried to get them verified as the official electors, although they would not be in line with the actual results. They don't need results; they just need to say it, and it should be true. Well, the fake electors from Nevada, who made up and presented fake documents to Congress, have been charged with a crime. But a Republican judge has stepped in and thrown out the case. The state's attorney general, however, is said to be challenging that decision. We'll see how the courts handle it from here. But there's there's the latest on what's been going on in Nevada. On to the actual primaries. Now, it was pretty interesting in a number of the races that happened yesterday are kind of interesting. For instance, the primary for the governor's race in Florida on both sides, the Democratic and the Republican, had some interesting things happen. For the Democrats, a former Republican who's now running as a Democrat uh, took the nomination handily. He won like 2-1 sort of results. He did very well. That his name is David Jolly, and we'll see more of him in the coming weeks. And the Republicans, uh, Byron Daniels, who has been leading in the polls for the Republican side, followed through with that, and he easily took the Republican nomination. So there's the governor's race set. There was an open seat in the Senate that was up. Now, this is the seat formerly held by Marco Rubio, who has been made Trump's Secretary of State. So he had to give up the Senate seat. A person named Ashley Moody was appointed to the seat, and she won the Republican nomination yesterday. Pretty easy. And on the Democratic side, there's a little surprise. There was a fellow by the name of Alex Vindeman. Now, that's a name you may recall. He was a resistor. He was somebody who he and his brother were both in the military, and Trump targeted them and ran them out of the military when they did the right thing and reported some of the things he was doing behind the scenes that were, of course, illegal, that were not appropriate and certainly not in the nation's security interests. Now, both of the brothers are running for office, and Alex Vindman was running down in Florida for the Senate seat. He raised a whole bunch of money. Now, there are people who say that money is the thing that matters in elections, and I'm not one of them, but people do say that. They look at candidates and they look at how much they've raised as opposed to what the situation is on the ground or how they're running their campaigns, etc. But in this case, Mr. Vindman raised $16 million for a Senate race, which is a good amount. His opponent is a local elected official, Angie Nixon, who's been in Florida government for decades, and at least two. And um, it seems that Vindman raised all that money, but kind of focused himself on the general election running against a Republican. And the one ad buy he appears to have made during the primaries didn't even mention his opponent. He just sort of was setting up the arguments he was going to use in the general election. And that did not work out well. Uh, his opponent, Angie Nixon, raised only $1 million. And what was different was that she was on the ground. She was going out and talking to voters and meeting people and continuing work she's been doing for 20 years so people know who she is and that she's out there. And she won. This was considered an upset. But also, a bit of a twist is while she's a Democrat, she's open to some of the more progressive messaging that's out there. You may have heard in the other races in other states about establishment versus progressive. Well, she picked up on some of the progressive issues. And in fact, she joined the Democratic Socialists as a member. She did not approach them for an endorsement. They did not endorse her in the race, but she did join as a member. And this has sent Florida pundits into a tailspin. They are absolutely going crazy down in Florida because she won the Democratic nomination and is progressive in her thoughts. In fact, David Jolly, the aforementioned former Republican who is now the Democratic nominee, went out of his way in his victory speech to say how much he hates socialism and he doesn't want to have anything to do with the Democratic Socialists. And then, congratulated her on winning her race. So we'll see how that works out between now and November. And there we are, 16 million versus 1 million, and 1 million takes it. If you're a guy or a gal who feels that money is the only thing that's important in politics, there's another story for you to consider. Now, a couple of embarrassments happened where Trump endorsed candidates in his home state of Florida were defeated or set back. There's the Florida Congressional District 7. A fellow by the name of Corey Mills is an elected official, is a member of Congress. He has some severe issues of domestic abuse and sexual harassment. And of course, that immediately gained him Trump's endorsement. However, the Republicans down in Florida 7th didn't see it that way. And a local news caster, Ryan, what is Ryan's last name? I don't remember Ryan's last name, but Ryan jumped into the race and he was very blunt about it. He said, The only reason I'm getting into the race is because this guy's so badly damaged on moral grounds that he shouldn't be in elected office. And the Republicans in District 7 agreed. And Mills lost last night. That also happened to Trump in the 19th district, which was a whole nother story. There's one person who was a local who was running, and then there were 6 or 8 different candidates who came from other states. I assume they moved into Florida with sufficient time to meet the residence requirements, but they all lined up. And matter of fact, 2 of the people were formerly candidates in Wisconsin that ran against each other, one a Democrat, one a Republican, but now they both live in Florida and they're both registered Republicans. So uh, they were both challenging this other guy, and the local guy won, and all of these people, including, if you remember the name Madison Cawthorn, who was in Congress for a few years back. He's the one who a Republican who managed to even upset the other Republicans by uh, telling stories out of school, so to speak. He's the one who publicly held a press conference to discuss how he had been invited by senators to a sex party. The Republican senators had gotten together and invited him to join them for a sex party. So he was not a favorite of the establishment Republicans, to say the least. And he ran in the 19th and was also one of the losers, as was another former Congressman Chris Collins. He used to play for the Cincinnati Bengals, and now he's a Republican. He was in Congress for a while. He ran in the 19th and also lost. But the Trump endorsed candidate also was one of the losers. And that brings us to the 25th congressional district. Uh, so this is on the Democratic side. There's a fellow by the name of Jared Moskowitz. He's a current congressman running for reelection, although this time there was an actual DSA endorsed candidate in one of the races. The candidate challenging Congressman Moskowitz was Oliver Larkin. And this was, a show of this was the showcase. This was the one that was the establishment versus the progressive. And the progressive got wiped out. Moskowitz won 63% to 36%. He really showed some power there, and in his statements made some disparaging comments about DSA as well. So once again, we'll see how that all plays out for all of the Democrats who have to run together between now and November. On to Wyoming. I'll just say that the Wyoming primaries, there was once again a Trump endorsed candidate who was beaten in the governor's race out in Wyoming. And other than that, yes, Wyoming, both parties nominated people for the Senate, the House, and statewide offices. There is an interesting twist to the Alaska primaries, and that is every state gets to decide the rules for how their state will handle the primaries. And in 2020, Alaska changed the rules. They set it up so that in the primary, anybody who wants to run can run. And then they determine who the top 4 vote getters are. And all 4 go on to run in the general election. And if any of them choose to drop out, which is their right, if they want to drop out, it does. They take the 5th place finisher and bring them in. So there's going to be 4 people. However you want to, however you want to do it, there's going to be 4 people. And so each of the electeds, all those who are nominated, there are 4 for each race, and that's what the voters in November will have to decide. An interesting case is the race where Daniel S. Sullivan, the current Republican incumbent for Senate, uh, also had a challenger who was a fellow Republican by the name of Daniel J. Sullivan Jr. And when he tried to file his paperwork to run, the Republicans in the Department of Elections tried to stop him from running. They refused to accept his paperwork. They said he wouldn't be allowed to run because he had a similar name to the senator, and clearly that was just some sort of a ruse. Well, Jay took his case to the courts, and the court said, "No, you're allowed to run if you meet all the requirements, and you can, qualify to run," which he had. So they had to put him on the ballot, and he came in third out of the four top vote getters. So Mary Batola, who is the Democrat, Daniel S. Sullivan, the incumbent, Daniel J. Sullivan Jr., the other Dan, and there's a fourth person as well. We'll all move on to the November. Now the Republicans have kicked it up a level. So now the DOJ is saying that they're investigating Jay, and they're going to find out what the real truth is here about his running for election. So there's a little side drama for what's happening in Alaska, but it is. I mentioned it particularly because of that interesting and now unique sort of system where they allow everyone to run, and then the top four instead of the top two move on. There's the same thing with the governor's race. The top two vote getters were actually Democrats, and the third and fourth finishers were Republicans. We'll see what that means in November, whether that is able to be maintained and a Democrat winds up with enough votes, or if that was just for the primary and when Alaskans go to the polls in November, they end up with a Republican governor. We'll find out. The voters will decide that. I think that's just about everything. Anything on elections or anything that you want to add in?
Yeah, I just wanted to note, I mean, like, nothing is 100%, and, there's all these, why elections go one way or the other, but it really says that a lot of these people who got traction had some kind of purchase in the community. Either they'd been there a long time, or they had gone out into the community and talked to a lot of people, or they were a local celebrity, I guess. But just something, like there really is something to be said about um, the person thinking that their representative represents them and isn't just some person who showed up. And I
Right.
feel
And
like sometimes we lose this perspective when we can only look at the big races, but it's actually really huge.
yeah, and it's not just money that matters. It's easy to say, let's just look at the money and say, and make decisions based on who has the most money. But that's not how people vote. And just like Bloomberg, Mike Bloomberg, who ran for the Democratic nomination for president a couple of years ago, spent something like $1 billion,
Yeah, like $1 billion. Yeah.
and the only delegates he won were the three from Guam. So for an investment of $1 billion, three delegates, that's not that's not math that's going to work.
We do love people from Guam.
And we love Guam, absolutely.
And they love Bloomberg, clearly.
I do want to mention the California race real quick. There was a congressional special election in California yesterday. The district was 14, and there are the two people who are moving forward. So whereas Alaska says the top four go on, the California system is the nonpartisan primaries take the top two vote getters and move on. In the 14th, that happened to be two Democrats, Aisha Wahab and Melissa Hernandez will be facing off in November to see who goes to Congress to represent the 14th. Oh, and over a dozen, so far at least, over a dozen seated incumbents, I guess that's redundant, but over a dozen incumbents have lost in the primaries. So whereas incumbency has always been or has been thought of as a bulletproof thing where you're going to get through if you're the incumbent, not that may not be so true. We'll have to see how that plays out in the other races between now and through September. But apparently, it's not as clear cut as that anymore.
Yeah, I mean the election that brought Trump and Starmer, and even there was this whole like wave of anti-establishment stuff, and so maybe that energy is still around places. It's pretty unusual to see an incumbent lose in the primaries.
That is true. That is true. What do we have here? With all the distractions that happen throughout our day and everyday life, we here at PolitiPod Live feel that it's incumbent on us to offer this public service announcement. The number of days since the unredacted Epstein list has not been released. We are at day 4,082. So we will have to, unfortunately, continue the countdown, the count up, and we will. This is PolitiPod Live. We'd like to thank you for joining in and listening. Thanks for being here for Political Talk. And you're welcome to join us every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Pacific and 9 p.m. Eastern, right here for PolitiPod Live. And if you want to join us for Political Laughs, you can join us and a half dozen of our friends for our political comedy podcast, PolitiPod. You'll find that at soundcloud.com/PolitiPod.
I'm Hannah Soldner.
And I'm Matt Nisanoff saying goodbye.